So China and Russia just kicked off their biggest naval exercise of the year, right off China's coast. But buried in the military statement was one line that most news outlets ran right past. And that line is the one that has Pentagon planners genuinely worried. Before I walk you through exactly what that line means, drop the country you're watching from in the comments. I actually pay attention to where everyone's tuning in, and it helps me know what angles to dig into next. So you probably saw the headlines yesterday. China and Russia, joint naval drills. The usual annual thing. But here's what I realized when I actually read the People's Liberation Army Navy statement. The whole thing. Not the press summary, not the wire service version, the actual document. They buried something in the middle of the third paragraph. And I'm going to explain to you exactly what that something was, why it matters, and why a few people in Washington are having a really, really bad Monday because of it. Let me back up for a second. On July 6th, 2026, the Chinese and Russian navies kicked off Joint Sea 2026. That's their big annual exercise. They've been doing this for years. It's not new. The location is Qingdao, which is a major port city on China's Yellow Sea coast. Russian ships sailed down, Chinese ships sailed out. They're doing reconnaissance drills, air defense stuff, live fire exercises. Standard operating procedure, right? But here's the thing that made me stop and reread the whole release. The exact same day those drills began, the plan, that's the People's Liberation Army Navy, announced they test-fired a submarine-launched ballistic missile with a training warhead into the Pacific. And that timing is not a coincidence. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. You've got a huge multilateral naval exercise going on. Russian warships, Chinese destroyers, frigates, a lot of moving pieces. A lot of international attention already on that part of the world. And on the very first day of that exercise, China decides to launch a missile from a submarine. Why? That's the question I kept coming back to. Because if you're trying to project strength, that's one way to do it. But if you're trying to send a very specific signal to a very specific audience, that's also a way to do it. And the audience I'm talking about, not just Taiwan, not just Japan, not just the United States, though obviously them too. It's the people who have to figure out what to do about it. The commanders, the intelligence analysts, the people who have to wake up at 3 a.m. when the satellite photos start coming in. So let me walk you through what actually happened on July 6th. The Chinese Navy released a statement, standard military jargon. They said the test was part of routine training. They said the training warhead landed in the Pacific in the predetermined sea area. They said it was all according to plan. And that may be true. It may have been planned weeks ago. They might have scheduled it independently of the joint exercise. But here's the problem with that. In real geopolitics, timing is the message. The drill started on the 6th. The missile test happened on the 6th, the same day, the same military, the same geopolitical moment. And then Taiwan's National Security Council weighed in, and they called it, and I'm quoting directly here, a provocation that destabilizes the Indo-Pacific. Now, Taiwan says stuff like that all the time. They've been saying stuff like that for years. But you have to ask yourself, why would they say it this time? What's different? Because if you've been paying attention, you know there's been a shift. A slow one, but a real one. Look, let me tell you something that people don't talk about enough. The United States has been operating in the Pacific for decades. The 7th Fleet, the Japanese bases, the Guam buildup, all of it. But China has been watching, and they've been building. And Russia, well, Russia is a different kind of problem right now. They're tied up in Europe. Their navy isn't what it used to be, but they still have submarines. They still have cruise missiles. They still have the Vardiag, which is a Slava-class cruiser, and that thing is no joke. So when those two countries decide to hold a joint naval exercise right off China's coast in the Yellow Sea, which is basically China's front yard, and then China launches a submarine missile on day one of that exercise, you have to understand this is not two friends playing in the backyard. This is two countries telling the world, and specifically telling the United States, that they can coordinate, that they can operate together, that the Pacific is not an American lake. And nobody saw that coming? No, that's not true. People saw it coming. Analysts have been warning about this for years. They were ignored. They were called alarmists. They were told China and Russia are natural rivals. They could never really cooperate. And then they did exactly that. Here's what I mean. The Chinese submarine that fired that missile, we don't know exactly which class it was. They don't tell us that. But we know the missile was a submarine-launched ballistic missile. That means it came from underwater. It was hidden. It was moving. And the message that sends to naval commanders in the Pacific is simple. We can hit you from anywhere, from any angle, and you won't see us coming. Now let me get into the details that almost every network missed. Most of the reporting I saw yesterday focused on the missile test itself. The headline was, China tests submarine missile. People read that, nodded, and moved on. But what I noticed, and I want you to think about this, is the wording of the Chinese statement. They said the missile had a training warhead. They said it landed in a predetermined sea area. They didn't say where that sea area was. Think about that for a second. They announced a missile test. They announced it involved a submarine. They announced the warhead was training. But they never said exactly where it splashed down. That's not an accident. That's a signal. It's a way of saying we can put a missile anywhere we want in the Pacific, and we don't have to tell you where. And for the people who actually have to think about these things, the Pentagon planners, the National Security Council staff, the submarine commanders themselves, that is the scariest part. Because let's be real about what a submarine-launched ballistic missile actually is. It's not a ship. It's not a plane. You can't track it the same way. A submarine can sit out there silent, hundreds of feet under the surface for months at a time. And then when it gets the order, it can launch something that travels halfway across the planet in 20 minutes. And you'll never see it coming. So when China tests that capability, on the same day their Navy is coordinating with Russian warships in a major exercise, what they're saying is, we're ready. Not next year, not next decade, now. And I think that's what got under Taiwan's skin, because Taiwan is right there. They're a few hundred miles away from Qingdao. They're in the Pacific. They're in the sea area where that missile might have splashed down. And when the National Security Council calls something a provocation that destabilizes the Indo-Pacific, they're not using diplomatic language for no reason. They are genuinely worried. Let me tell you what worries me. Not the missile itself, not the exercise, not any single piece of this thing. What worries me is the pattern. Because if you go back and look at the last few years, China has been testing more often, more advanced systems. They've been doing it quietly in the background while the world was focused on other things. The war in Ukraine, the Middle East, American elections. And while we were looking over there, they were building over here. Now let me bring Russia back into this. The Varyag is a big ship. It's a cruiser. It has anti-ship missiles that can reach out hundreds of miles. It has air defense systems. It's not the most modern ship in the world, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to be there. And the fact that Russia sent it, that they sent their flagship of the Pacific Fleet to Qingdao to train with the Chinese Navy, that is not nothing. Russia and China have been building their military relationship for years. They've done joint exercises before, but the scale has been growing, the complexity has been growing, and the timing has been getting more aggressive. And the message to the United States is unmistakable. You are not the only power in the Pacific anymore. You are not the only one with allies. You are not the only one who can project force. And what happened on July 6th, 2026, is the moment that message went from theoretical to real. Now I want to ask you a question, and I want you to really think about it. Why do you think China chose July 6th? The anniversary of something? Maybe. Or maybe it was just the day the schedule worked out. But what if it wasn't? What if they deliberately timed this to happen when the United States was distracted, when the news cycle was focused on something else, when the political world was looking inward instead of outward? Because that's the thing about the Pacific. It's big, it's vast, and the United States has commitments there, alliances, bases, ships. But if you're China and you're watching American politics and you see the chaos and you see the division and you see the way the country can't agree on anything, let alone foreign policy, why wouldn't you test the limits? Why wouldn't you launch a missile on the same day your Navy is running drills with the Russians? Why wouldn't you send a message that says, we're here, we're coordinated, and we're ready? And that's the part that the headlines aren't telling you. The headlines say, China and Russia launch drills. China tests missile. But what actually happened is something more subtle and more dangerous. What happened is two countries with overlapping interests and growing military capabilities decided to remind the world that they exist, that they matter, that they have the ability to change the balance of power in the most important ocean on Earth. And the United States is watching. The Seventh Fleet is out there. There are submarines in the Pacific. There are intelligence assets monitoring every move. But the real question isn't what the United States can do. It's what the United States will do. Because if you've been following American foreign policy over the last few years, you know there's been a shift, a pullback, a sense that the world is getting more complicated and America can't be everywhere at once. And that's exactly what China and Russia are counting on. So let me bring this back to the ground level, to what this actually means for you, for the viewer, for the person watching this video right now. Because I get it. You see a headline about naval drills and a missile test in the Pacific, and it feels far away. It feels like something that doesn't affect your daily life. But here's the thing. The Pacific is the biggest ocean on Earth. It connects Asia to North America. It's where trade flows, where goods move, where military power is projected. And when that balance shifts, when China and Russia start coordinating more closely, when China starts testing missiles more frequently, when the United States starts questioning its commitments, that doesn't stay far away forever. Eventually, it comes home. Because the whole point of a submarine-launched ballistic missile is that you can't see it coming. You can't stop it once it's launched. You can only try to prevent it from happening in the first place. And prevention requires attention, resources, commitment, alliances. The last few years have been a wake-up call for the United States. The world is not getting simpler. It's getting more complex, more dangerous, more contested. And the Pacific is where that contest is playing out in real time. So what happens next? That's the question I've been asking myself all day. Since I read that planned statement, since I saw the video of the Russian ships arriving in Qingdao, since I watched the coverage from Taiwan. And here's what I think. I think this drill is going to end on July 13th, like they said it would. The Russian ships will sail back to Vladivostok. The Chinese ships will return to their home ports. The exercise will be declared a success. But the message will linger. Because now everyone knows. China and Russia can do this. They can coordinate. They can hold major exercises. They can test advanced weapon systems. And they will do it again. The annual drills happen every year. Next year, they'll be bigger, more complex, more advanced. And the question for the United States, for Taiwan, for Japan, for South Korea, for everyone in the region is, what are you going to do about it? Because doing nothing is a choice, and doing something is a choice. And staying where you are, just watching, hoping it all works out, that's a choice too. So I'll leave you with this. What happened on July 6th, 2026 was not a one-off event. It was not a training exercise that got out of hand. It was not a coincidence. It was a statement, a clear, deliberate, unmistakable statement. And if you didn't hear it the first time, you're going to hear it again. And when that happens, when the next test happens, when the next drill happens, when the next statement comes out of Beijing or Moscow, I want you to remember what I told you today. I want you to remember that timing is the message, that the details matter, that buried in the military jargon, in the press releases, in the routine announcements, there's always something they're not telling you. And my job, the whole point of this channel, is to explain what they're not telling you. So stay with me. This whole thing is going to keep moving, keep changing, keep escalating. And I'm going to be here walking you through it one piece at a time. Because the Pacific isn't getting any smaller. The submarines aren't getting any quieter. And the message is getting louder. All right, that's what I've got for you today. I'll be back with more as soon as something else breaks. And something always breaks. Thanks for listening.